We wanted to get a generationally and geographically dispersed female British audience to talk to. And we did that by, we put adverts and press releases in various magazines like Yours, Woman's Weekly, Saga, The Lady, and I think Links Rural as well. I'm not quite sure how that slipped in. And from the respondents we got to those adverts, we selected 30 women to speak to. The youngest I spoke to was 42, the oldest was 95. We did approach some magazines such as The Voice and Asian Eye with our press releases, hoping to also get some ethnic minority participants to be involved. But those magazines didn't choose to run our press releases. And in fact, I received only white women responded to my call to interview. So it's an all-white sample. And sort of one of the things that emerges is the sort of programs women were talking about quite expand our idea of what we mean by television for women. So for a number of reasons, they spoke about other genres such as sports programming, natural history programming, and pop music programs. But as I'll go on to explain, kind of more important than what was watched in their memories was how they watched it and who they watched it with. And despite the fact 1947 to 1989 is such a massive a period of massive social change, the way the women narrated their lives was surprisingly similar across generations. And in fact, the women's talk was kind of characterised by their emphasis on the relational experience of viewing, particularly talking about their lives as children watching with other family members and about their lives as mothers watching with their children. And sort of these are kind of in memory studies often described as wallpaper memories, which is quite a dismissive term, as we also sort of dismissively refer to television as wallpaper. And I would sort of suggest that, you know, these interviews and the way the women talk about television indicate that we maybe need to reconsider the importance of wallpaper, and it sort of points to television as a technology of intimacy and begins to illustrate the sort of gendering of memory and how we remember. So that's that. There were generational shifts, but where these occurred, it was less about the types of programs that were watched, and it was actually about how women presented themselves within the interviews, with greater reflexivity, greater knowledge around sort of feminism and femininity. Also, obviously, younger women were much more media literate, and the role of television in their lives was, they found it much easier to talk about it. They recognised it as an object of value, and they understood why I might be interested in their relationship with television. So the differences between generations' lives as women were similar, depressingly, you might say, but how they narrated those lives were very different. So some genres did emerge as important. The most significant to us was pop music programs, which emerged as a genre which was really significant to women from their sort of early 70s down to their 40s during their adolescence. And it's one of the few examples of programming that women talked about as having a personal resonance. Programs such as Top of the Pops, but particularly Ready, Steady, Go and The Tube. So Ready, Steady, Go was ITV's, I think it was Saturday night pop music programme presented by Cathy McGowan and Keith Fordyce. And The Tube, of course, the 1980s Channel 4 programme presented by Paula Yates and Jules Holland. And to the women I spoke about, it was actually those female presenters which were what gave the programme its resonance. And they sort of talked about these women, how they identified with these women, but also this sort of access to not only culture and music, but style and fashion advice that these sorts of programmes gave them. So I've got here a quote from Fiona, originally from Aberdeen, but now living on the Isle of Mull. She's talking about Cathy McGowan in Ready, Steady, Go. She says, "I personally did my thing and I wasn't interested in sharing. If they came and didn't look fashionable, well, sorry, you obviously haven't been watching the same programmes as I have. I'm not going to tell you what to watch or wear. I thought of myself as a leader of fashion." So that's the importance of Cathy McGowan in sort of informing the clothes she liked to wear. And then here, Dawn, younger, she's 42, talking about Paula Yates on The Tube. And she really here, I think, sort of draws attention to the fact that it was the female presenter of the Tube that she particularly identified over the cheesy male presenters on Top of the Pops. And I did these interviews several months before the whole Jimmy Savile thing erupted. And it was quite interesting in these interviews that women obviously had been watching the programmes as teenagers and found these men quite unpalatable. Another aspect of the women's talk that was quite interesting was about how many of them spoke about the pleasure of watching attractive men on television. You know, this was a reason to watch certain programmes. And again, it kind of drew out the notion of what television for women might be. So they would talk about programmes, sports programmes were quite popular in this respect, but also gritty dramas, sitcoms. They were drawing these attractive men from all over the place. And really, I think what that begins to do is show the significance of the regularity, familiarity, and commitment that television brings to the viewing experience, but also to the question of desire. It's that sort of domestic and feminised way of watching. So I've just got a couple of quotes of women about men they fancied on TV. Sue E., she's in her 60s, probably Roger Moore, Patrick McGowan, and later John Thaw. That started with Red Cap. They were my chief fancies. They were British. I don't remember having American heroes. And rather sophisticated, yet good at the action stuff. In other words, unlike any of the male species I'd have come across in real life. That was the attraction, I think. And then here's Sue O. The Sues were very chatty about who they fancied on TV. Patrick Mower, he was in a serial in the early 80s called Dark Side of the Sun, a whole 6-part serial. Unfortunately, I missed some because that was before we had our video, and that was on a specific night of the week, and we went out for 2 or 3 of them. But I did see that serial, and I thought, yeah, definitely dishy. So I definitely used to like seeing anything that had him in it after that. And it's that kind of regular viewing, you know, someone to look forward to that really came across in the interview. So I'd say, more than anything, perhaps what these interviews draw our attention to is how we might expand the idea of what television for women is and how we need to maybe consider how we go into the archives to look for information.